Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome to the Union Baptist Church Bible Study Hour. After this song, Lead Me to Calvary, meet me at Luke, the 23rd chapter and the 33rd verse. King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn the crown brow. Lead me to Calvary, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget. How much you loved me. Lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget thine agony. Lest I forget the pain you suffered for me. Lest I forget thine agony. Just lead me to Calvary. Lead me to Calvary. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be crucified, to be executed. When they came to the place called the skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Now, let us study to show ourselves approved with our pastor, Reverend Dr. Timothy Lake.
Thank you, Sister Kathleen, for such a wonderful and spirited devotion, and Scripture was right on target for us tonight. We give God thanks for allowing us to gather again as a people who are called by His name to worship and to study. Study is a form of worship, and so this is a way in which we have purpose to approach God tonight through the studying of His Word. We are here at Union Baptist Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and so happy for those of you who are able to join us tonight to continue in our study in the fourth gospel, the gospel according to St. John. So we have been at this for a while now, so we'll see what the Lord will do in terms of concluding our study for tonight. We're going to try to spend as much attention as we can to the final chapters of the book, chapters 19, 20, and 21. Maybe some attention to 18, but not too much. We've covered some ground, and we'll see if we will be able to make it all the way this evening. I want to remind us of the way in which we have parsed the book. We've been thinking about it as a drama. John's gospel is presenting a drama about the life of Jesus. And the drama consists of 2 acts. Chapters 2 through 12 form the basis of the first act of the drama. And then chapters 13 through 20, the second act of the drama. And then it's booked in by a prologue and an epilogue. So we have an introduction and a kind of concluding chapters that makes up chapter 1 and chapter 21 at the end. So you have one way of parsing the book of John. There are other ways that you can do it. But let us see if we can gain some particular insights by parsing the book this way. So we're in the second part of the drama, the last part of it, moving towards the epilogue as the Lord see fit for us to do. So we have talked about the signs that the gospel, John's gospel, narrates certain signs and miracles that Jesus performs. We have identified 6 major signs that we see. And the epilogue, we'll see the 7th major sign that Jesus performs that is centered around Jesus' life in ministry and relationship to the disciples. In chapter 19, we'll see Jesus before after the trial before Pilate, and then the sentencing to death that occurs, and then moving right to the crucifixion, which is the high point, the denouement of the drama, if you will. The high point of the drama is, of course, the crucifixion of Jesus, leading towards the resurrection. And then the resolution of the drama comes in the appearances of Christ, the post-crucifixion appearances of Christ before the disciples. All right. So we left off talking about Barabbas and the choice between Barabbas and Jesus being the 2 choices, one to be to pardon one versus the other, and the crowd is crying out for the release of Barabbas. And so we talked about Barabbas as a bandit, and did we see this in chapter 18, verse 40? And so he's called a bandit, and we talked about what that could mean. That could possibly mean not just a thief, but one who is in rebellion against the Roman overlords. So a bandit could be someone who was, say, a zealot, or someone who was a rebel Jew who was in revolt, leading some kind of revolt against the Roman occupiers. And so we need not just satisfy ourselves with thinking about Barabbas as a common thief. In any case, he's distinguished from Jesus, right? So in terms of the crimes that are presented before Pilate, right? So Jesus's crime is not that of one who is a bandit, but one who is outright salacious, one who is actually the first charge is that he is the king, right? That he is a king. And here it elicits the idea that Jesus is in competition or challenging the authority of the emperor, right? So that we talked about that Jesus had no army, no standing military force that would even mark him as a king in any traditional sense. So probably little credence was given to that charge by Pilate, because it was obvious this individual wasn't presenting a military or a kind of traditional threat to the Roman authority. So a king must be thought of in some other kind of way. And so there's this exchange between Pilate and the Jews initially, right? The Jewish authority. Then Pilate says, take them, if he has, you go deal with him on your own terms, right? If he has some kind of charge, you deal with him, because, Pilate doesn't see any evidence of why he has to intervene in this case, right? And so the Jewish leaders say, if we had the authority, if we say this man has committed a crime is in rebellion, then that's enough. We bring him before you because we say he's a criminal, and on the authority of our say-so, you should be able to act. And so that sets in motion a kind of exchange or interview, or some people call it an interrogation, between Pilate and Jesus that is fruitless, right? So doesn't yield anything. And so Jesus is sent to Herod, and that also yields no evidence, and then is sent back to Pilate, right? And so the drama continues. So in chapter 19, let's turn our attention to chapter 19 and read down to chapter 19, verses 1 through 16. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation in the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to be crucified. So John is narrating the sequences of events that are immediately leading to Jesus' passion, right, to the crucifixion of Jesus. This is the last exchange. And so when we turn our attention to slow this text down, right, and to do what we call a close reading of the text, we kind of see what's going on here. So Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. That's the first verse in chapter 19, that he took Jesus and had him flogged. So this is what Jesus is being flogged. So here Pilate has already is already not finding it, already trying to release and to excuse himself from this case altogether. So Pilate has made all kinds of overtures to suspend the sentence, to release, to dismiss this case, to get it outside of his court, because the idea is that Pilate sees no guilt. He sees no crime here. He sees nothing that would bring the Roman Empire, the state, if you will, into action here. And so he is sensing that there is some kind of manipulation going on here, right? And not just sensing, he knows what's happening. He knows this is what we call today, when we have those phenomenon where people call the police to their home or call the police to a scene of a crime, allegedly, and the police come and they think it's a shooter or some kind of death threatening situation, and the person puts themselves in the position to be executed by the police, right? So this is when people set the police up to actually kill them, right? To actually take their life. This is kind of like suicide by police, right? Or suicide by cop, right? We call it. In a sense, that's a manipulation of the situation, right? That's a manipulation of a protected force or a legal arm, arm of the state to do something that is illegal or extra legal, right? And so that's what the Jews are doing here, right? So they are setting Pilate up to do what they themselves either can't do, won't do, but want to have done, right? Which is the ridding of themselves of Jesus, right? And so we know through the narration of the gospel there are plenty reasons why the Jewish authority have hesitated on moving on Jesus. One, we see over and over throughout the text where they hesitate to seek Jesus' death for fear of the crowd, right? So that's one motive. That's one factor that stays their hand, right? That causes them to put on pause or to redirect their energies towards Jesus' death. The fear of the crowd. So Jesus' own reputation is preceding him, is growing large, and with that, Jesus is performing all of these signs. Remember, we don't have a hesitant Jesus in John. We have Jesus who's right off the bat performing miracle, sign after sign, right? And some of these have to do with largesse towards the people, their desires, healing, fulfillment of wishes and desires that they have. It's not all just healing, because we know that the wedding at Canaan was not about a healing, right? But it was a show. Some of these are associated with the festival days, the high festival days of the Jewish calendar, even starting with the Sabbath itself, where he heals somebody on the Sabbath, right? So some of these signs are associated with those key moments in the Jewish calendar. And so this, of course, is generating a lot of interest in Jesus. If not just for straight belief in Jesus as the Messiah, but at least we see evidence of growing and increasing confidence of Jesus as a healer, right? And so that's enough right there for the people who will not think very lightly of their free medical care being extinguished I shouldn't say it that way. That's some crazy stuff. But you know what I mean. They have an opportunity for a physician who's running around, not charging anything, right? But performing all of these. Well, anyway, and then people who are, who are in need of food, he feeds the 5,000 and has more abundance left over, right? And so all of this kinds of ways in which Jesus is meeting needs, and that grows in population. Not only, so I'm saying withstanding a commitment to Jesus as the Messiah, Jesus is meeting needs, and that by itself can make it hazardous to attack someone who is meeting needs of people so clearly, right? And so Jesus is expanding these signs and miracles in a way that that starts to get even those who would be believers in him to be taken aback. And so it's about Jesus's claims of an identity with God, right? On intimate terms, not just he knows God, but he is God, right? Or he and the Father are one, right? And so these things, even for those who may be interested in the signs and the wonders that he is performing, they have trouble with those I am statements that Jesus is making, right? So he has a series of I am statements, and those I am statements are becoming problematic, even for the crowd, right? And when Jesus then raises Lazarus from the dead, then Jesus comes into direct challenge to those who would be hard pressed to actually see him as a God. Because remember now, the idea is that nobody has seen God, right? And that God is not to be seen in that way. People understand the glory of God, right? And remember in the Hebrew Bible, all the time when God's glory is shown or revealed, bad things happen to people, right? Because people just don't see the glory of God and get away with it unscathed. Remember even when somebody, I can't remember the book where, I think it was in Kings, where the Ark of the Covenant was being drawn by oxen, right? And it went astray, and somebody touched it, right? And they died. And so even just so this is the glory of God, right? It's not to be trifled with, right? In that way, and for Jesus to claim that the Father that he is the Father, that the glory of God is manifest in him. It's hard for people to digest, right? And what I'm suggesting is that the raising of Lazarus, because Jesus says, I am the resurrection, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, this is the height of it, right? You don't get any more than this. And so we have it in the mouth of the Jewish leaders. Now this, we have to kill him. Because what? It is better for one man to die, right, than for many to die. It's ready for one man to die for his sins, then for all of us to die for the sins of the one, right? So this is the excuse, this is the logic that the priests used for killing Jesus, for going after Jesus, right? Okay. And so we have Jesus here before Pilate, and the very first verse in chapter 19, we see Jesus as being flogged. This is before Pilate presents Jesus to the authorities, right? To the Jews. It's before he presents Jesus to the authorities. He has already flogged him, right? Now, this flogging, we know from the scholars, is the first step, the first action of the crucifixion, right? So people who were being crucified were usually, or not, it wasn't unusual for them to be flogged first, right? Some kind of physical punishment that would happen to you, some kind of beating or battering that would have happened to you before you actually were on the cross, right? So this flogging is a prelude to the crucifixion. And the flogging is much like what we saw in the Passion of Jesus, with what's that guy name? Neil, what's his name? Gibson, right? Much like that, where you have the flogging is that first opening scene there with the flogging, if you can even stand it, right, to watch any more than 2 minutes of it. But it's the flogging of it where they would have straps of really twigs from the tree, right, from this really malleable tree with the twigs from it all woven together with the loose ends of it, and on the ends of it would be braided either pieces of bone or metal, lead pieces with sharp hooks on the end, so that when you were flogged, it would tear the flesh off your back. So here is the kind of flogging, and the person who was being flogged would be tied to some kind of post and their back exposed, and so they would be flogged in that way. So this was such a harsh, flogging, or what some texts call, say, scourge. They were scourging, so scourging and flogging, right? And then this was so harsh that most people, it wasn't unusual for people to die just from the flogging, and so never make it to the crucifixion at all, that the bodies would give way under the weight of the flogging itself. So this was no simple thing. You could save yourself some nails and some wooden beams if they expire under the flogging. And so for Jesus to actually survive the flogging was no minor feat. And so we have here at the beginning the flogging. So this flogging is already an indication that Pilate has pronounced guilt on Jesus. Right. So this is the point that I really want to make here, is that Jesus has already been found guilty, that Jesus is already going to be found to be guilty and going to be executed. It's not like this flogging is just for a mockery or just to make. This flogging is saying that Pilate has already agreed to crucify him, you see. So he's already on the way to being crucified. He's already been so. So when he presents Jesus here in chapter 19, he's not saying, this is not a question about whether or not Jesus is going to be crucified. It's already been determined because he's been flogged, right? So this is what he's on the way to the cross. And so then they put on him, some soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head and dressed him in a purple robe. So we usually think about this in a kind of a quick read, in a way of translating that into our terms, as if Jesus was mocked as a king, right? So this crown of thorn is for us too easily rendered as a makeshift mockery of a king's crown, right, or a coronation of a king. But most scholars say that that's probably not the case. So that this crown of thorns is more like the triumph of an athletic event. So when you would win an athletic event in the gymnasium or in the Colosseum, you would get a crown. You would get a crown like this. You would get this woven together wreath over your head. So that's more like what Jesus was wearing, something that would have signaled a champion of an event, that he had triumphed in an event. So it's that kind of mockery, not that he had a crown on. You could see why it wouldn't be the crown, right? Because then they would be acknowledging, Pilate would be acknowledging that Jesus was a pretender to the throne, right, against Roman Empire, which nobody Pilate knew that wasn't the case, right? So this mockery, the people who are mocking him, the soldiers are mocking him. Look at him victorious. Look at our champion, right? It's that kind of mockery. Oh, that's just to add insult to injury, right? Yeah. So they kept coming to him, so they put him on this purple robe, right? And so, it's hard to know what to make of that. Some people, you can interpret that purple robe in the Hebrew or in the Greek as not purple but as lavender, right? You can think about it in a different way. And then the robe itself, where would this robe have come from, given the situation that they were in, the setting, right? It's probably a robe, a piece of garment that was just around, that may have been already soaked and already used piece of rag that was around. Yeah. Anyway, let's just leave that alone. But you can get into that to see that we don't think that they had a brand new piece of purple robe, waiting there for this. They just grabbed any old piece of fabric there and put it on. And so then, while they are doing this, they are going up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," right? And what? They're smacking him in the face, right? So now this is interesting. We don't get that, right? So we don't really pay attention to that. This is what is happening among the soldiers. This is what the soldiers are doing, right? And they're playing this kind of game with him, this coy game, and they're taunting him, and as they saying, "Hail to the King of the Jews, hail to our champion," smack in the face, right? So he's already been flogged and scourged, right? And yet he's still heaping more abuse on him, right? This is before he is even presented to the crowd, right? And so this smacking in the face, of course, echoes what happened to Jesus when he's taken before Caiaphas, the high priest. Right? And so when Jesus refuses to answer the high priest, he answers him in a sharp way. Someone smacks him and says, "Is that how you respond to the high priest?" Right? And smacks him on the face. Right? So he is being hit in the face again. And so in verse 4, we say, Pilate went out again and said to them, now Pilate goes out to the crowd. This is happening. Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him. If he find no case against him, why did they flog him already? Even if he found no case, he had already pronounced the judgment anyway. And so they would have seen that. Just when Jesus was presented, they already knew Pilate's decision was to go through with the execution. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorn and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." Listen at that. So what is Jesus? So in the previous verses, hail the king, right? This is what the Romans are saying, right? In a mocking way. Here, hail the king. The accusation that the Jewish authority has brought against Jesus is that he says he's a king, right? He is a king. He's a king. So then Pilate says, when he brings him out, hail the man. You see, right there, you already missed it, right? So what Pilate is saying, hail the man, not hail the king, not hail the person who is claiming to be a king, but hail the man, right? What Pilate has done is said, this is just a man, right? This is a man. Hail the man. This is the man. You said a king. I'm saying this is a man, right? So Pilate is not buying into this idea that Jesus is claiming to be a king, right? It says hail the man. Anyway, he's convinced that this Jesus is bleeding and Jesus is a man, right? And so when the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him," right? So here they had here you have the chief, the priests and the police, pushing Pilate and pushing it all the way to the cross, right? Crucify him, crucify him. And so what you have here is John is making sure that we do not release, that we do not excuse the chief priests in the Jewish authority, right, from what is happening to Jesus. Although the Romans are doing it, it is the priests that are the ones who are setting the course of action here, right? So he wants to, so they cheer it on, they egg it on, and they themselves are not doing it, right? So Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him. And the Jews answered him, we have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he claimed to be the Son of God. Aha. Now we have a different charge, right? And we have the true charge. This is now the real case against Jesus, right? Not that he claimed to be the King of the Jews. It's because he claimed to be the Son of God, right? Now the real case is there. It's okay for them to reveal it because Pilate's not going back on the crucifixion anyway. He's too far down the road for it anyway, right? And so now the real case is he claims to be the Son of God. So the real issue is revealed, right? And then in verse 8, and then Pilate heard this. When Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. See? Now when it was just you were a king, right, you claim to be a king. Now the real case is he claims to be God. Now Pilate's like, what? What is going on here? And so then he entered his headquarters and asked Jesus, where are you from? Right. Now, is this a question of Jesus' birth date and his birth address? Is that what Pilate is asking for? Is Pilate asking, what day were you born and what location were you born in? Where are you from? Right. And so it could be because Pilate has said, look at the man, right? And then they're saying he's the Son of God, which makes Pilate hesitant, if not fearful, as the text says. Pilate needs now assurance that this is just a mortal man, right? So I've presented to you the man. Now you are claiming to me that the real problem with him is that he claims to be God. And now Pilate is like, where are you from? Who are you really? Right? Which one are you? Who are you really? And where are you from? He says. And so then, but Jesus what? But Jesus gave no answer. And then so in verse 10, Pilate therefore said to him, do you refuse to answer me? Right? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you? And then Jesus speaks. In verse 11, Jesus answers him, you would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Wait a minute. So now Jesus has been saying all along what? That his home is really from above. Jesus is from above. Jesus is always talking to them, and they're misunderstanding Jesus. And Jesus is frustrated, especially with Nicodemus, remember? How can I be born again? Right? And then he says, you, a learned man in the Jewish law, and I'm trying to talk to you about things that are spiritual. If I speak to you about things that are humanly and you can't understand them, and how much success will I have speaking to you about the things of above? Jesus is always juxtaposing both realities, his home and that is not here, and his home that is here, right? And so in the beginning of John's chapter, the Gospel of John, we get Jesus already in heaven, right? And Jesus is already there, and Jesus is only dispatched to earth, right? And Jesus is here with us, but Jesus is always referencing that his home is, that he is here and not here. God is with him. He is with the Father. They are in one. They are one within each other, even as he is here right now, right? See, Jesus, but this is hard for people to say. So Jesus is saying, so Jesus' response to Pilate is, you have no authority over me unless that authority that has been given to you from above. There is no authority here on this earth over me, right? There is only authority that is granted from above, right? And then so he says, Therefore, the one, and this is Jesus passing judgment, right? So you have no authority unless that authority that has been given to you from above. In other words, whatever you do is under the permissive will of God, right? And then Jesus then takes a sharp turn, right, and says, therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. Now, Jesus now says, is Jesus releasing Pilate of his guilt in association with his execution? No, he's not, is he? He's not. But then Jesus is saying that to hand me over is worse. So he's not releasing the Jewish authority either. As a matter of fact, he's saying they're at greater guilt upon them than the guilt that is upon Pilate. Now, this is something that's worth to think about for a moment, right? So that if the authority is given, if Pilate is only doing what he's doing because of the will of God, this is the Father's plan for him to behave this way. How is it that he can be found guilty of anything? Right? So if God allows, not only that, but orders, ordains, authorizes the behavior that allows a person to put Jesus on the cross, how is it that I'm the person who puts Jesus on the cross to be held and responsible for that act, right? This is a thing. And so if this plan of God was already hashed out before the beginning of the world, right? And the Jews play their part by handing Jesus over. How are they being accused of double guilt when they're just performing their role as in the drama of Jesus towards the re-sanctification of God's created order, right? This is the thing, right? So you would think that nobody really is guilty here in this act, right? That because they're all acting out of the compulsion of God, out of the permissive will of God, and therefore God is really the one who is controlling in that fault in the drama, right? If there is fault in it. What Jesus is saying, no, that kind of reasoning is not how it is, right? That's not how it is. It may be the case that God is ordaining and allows something to happen. But because you do it, woe is you, right? This is the hard thing. This is the thing. So even though we say God is control of everything, right? And then if God is in control of everything, then everything happens either because, one, God allows it to happen, or God actually ordains it to happen, either by the direct will of God or by the permissive will of God. Either way, it's God's will, right? So if it's God's will, it seems like we would be excused of the guilt associated with our behavior, but it's not the case. Right? No, that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not saying guilty by association. Jesus is not saying, oh, you guilty just because you're a drama. No, Jesus is saying you straight out guilty because you're doing it, right? And so that this is no like asterisk by the guilt, right? This is straight your guilt, right? Your guilt, your guilt to bear and your guilt to atone for, so that the things is you willfully acting out of your own will, even though your will is not stronger than God's will, but your will may even be in the will of God. But because you are doing it, you are not to be excused for it. So I like to look at it like this. So if God if all of the created order is under the control of God, then to a degree, right, we all are subjects to God's will. The question is, will you be used for the bad part of God's will? Will you be an instrument that carries out God's will that also carries the guilt with it, right, associated with it? What I'm trying to say is that when Pharaoh was being challenged by Moses, and it was 10 plagues, right? You know, about the third one, Pharaoh was like, oh, well, maybe let me let these people go, you know. And then we read what? God says, I hardened his heart. Right? So maybe it didn't take all of them, but God said, this is the way it's going to happen, because what? You will know that it was by my hand that you were delivered out of Egypt, right? Not because Pharaoh relented, not because Pharaoh had a change of heart, not because Pharaoh was deep down and a good person on the inside. He just had to be shown his ways, right? No, it's because God delivered you, right? Now, this is the thing. We are made instruments of God's will. And the question is, God, please make me an instrument, a good instrument of your will, right? So you could be made into a bad instrument of God's will, and you still guilty for that because you're doing it. There's no relief in it. But we just pray that God use us to be be a good instrument, right? And so in that we know the difference, right? We know the difference when we're being used in one way or the other, right? All right. The more strident, kind of example is when you see Jesus at eating the Passover meal, and he says that the betrayer is among us, right? Everybody's like, what? Who is it? Who is it, right? Oh, good Lord. Oh, please don't let it be me, right? He says the betrayer is among us, and yet he's coming. Then he says, the one who dips or whatever, and he says to Judas, that which you purpose to do, go and do it quickly. Right. And even the story of Judas himself, right? Judas, a couple, at least one account in the Bible, he tries to correct it, right? Remember, he goes back to them and says, no, I'm not going to do it. That's it, I'm over. And they says, you're taking the silver, you're taking it as over. You are already there. Because just because you already agreed, you already are in league with us. So it doesn't matter if you do it or not. You're in it already, right? So Judas is in it. He cannot be. He tried to get out of it. He can't, right? I mean, this is not an argument. This only I'm thinking is that, listen, the world is God's, and the fullness thereof is God's. And Lord, God, please make me an instrument towards your good. Right? I mean, this is exactly.
I never do that. I never do anything like that. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the counterfactual. That's the counterpart of it, is that once God purposes you for the good, you can't even do anything to stop it, right? So Peter denies him 3 times, but yet he still makes him what? The rock of faith by which he builds the church, right? Moses is going out, and I hate to go all the way back to this because I'm never going to get to the rest of it. So, but Moses is going out, has the visitation with God on Mount Carmel, and goes out to go to Pharaoh. As he's traveling towards Egypt, in the middle of the night, God tries to kill him. This is the one he is sending to confront Pharaoh. Pharaoh, before the night is out, he has an encounter with the angel. God's trying to kill it. The very one he's sending. Why? And it's his wife who has the good fortune, the good sense, to cut the foreskin of the firstborn and taps the angels. You guys remember the story, right? You say, yeah, I remember, Pastor, but tell it to us, right? It cuts his foreskin, and then the angel passes and let him go, right? Because Moses hadn't consecrated, hadn't fulfilled the covenant, which is to do the first cutting of your firstborn, right? And so Moses had already transgressed the law, but the wife cuts it, taps the angel, and then lets him go, right? Hey, even Moses almost didn't make it, right? And then you know what happened at the end. He doesn't go into the promised land, right? Yeah, I mean, so I'm saying even God's instruments of promoting God's will and advancing the cause of the kingdom, they themselves are subject to the guilt associated with their behavior. Need I even bring up?
In order to fulfill God's word, none of us are perfect. Not Moses, nobody that you said. But if any of us were perfect, we've been able to do Jesus' job, and that just ain't true.
That's true. Now you're taking me to the end. Okay, let's go.
Sorry.
Okay, we're going to move. We're going to get off of that because we stay. Let's go to the chapter 20. In the John's gospel is the only gospel we get we get Nicodemus associated with Joseph of Arimathea. We don't get this in the other gospels, right? So there's no association between Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea in the other gospel, only in John's gospel. So in John's gospel, we get the passion, the death of Jesus narrated with material that is only found in John's gospel. There are some things that the other gospels do not present. What seems to be particularly a focus of John's gospel is his account of the fulfillment of the scriptures. So John is always saying, this was done so that the scriptures may be fulfilled. Was done so that the prophecy may be fulfilled. And John is doing that repeatedly over the course of Jesus' death and his resurrection, right? So what we see as a focus of John is the proving of the scriptures being fulfilled in Jesus. And so we get that over and over, and then we get this extra material, that is not in the other gospel. It may be the case that John has recourse to another document, another source material that the other gospels didn't have, in this sort of the doings of Jesus, the signs of Jesus. I don't know. It may be the case, but it may not be the case. And so, but we have this extra material, this different material. What we get here is even in the presentation of the garden itself, right? So the place where Jesus is crucified, right? We get the place called Golgotha, right? It's a place of the skull, right? So, and we get the location that it is in a garden, right? So Jesus is crucified in a garden hill that is called Golgotha, which says that there is a mountain or there is a skull-like figure, right? So that's why we have two different locations in Israel about the tomb of Christ, right? So we have one, the Holy Sepulchre, right? The tomb of the shrine of the Holy Sepulchre is one. That's the one that the emperor's mother in the 3rd century found to be what was reported as the place where Jesus was killed, right, was crucified. And so now there's this big sepulcher all on the top of it. You see Golgotha, the heel where Jesus was, and you go down to the slab, and then to the sepulcher where Jesus was buried, right? It's all in there. Then there's the other site is called the garden site, right? And so this is Golgotha. This is a garden. It was a winery. It was a vineyard. There is the side of a mountain right outside of the garden, and we see evidence of tombs there. And if you look off, and I'm pointing to look off to the east there of the garden, you'll see the face of a rock cliff that looks like a skull. And so in the 15th century, some explorers went and they were looking for the death of Jesus, and they found that site, and they looked at that rock face, and they remembered that in John you have a garden, you have a skull, and they looked, there is a burial site there. There is a place where in a winery area, which would have been a place for wealthy people, right? So we know Joseph of Arimathea was rich. So this would be, they find all of the clues there, and they say this is the real place, right? So there is some contingent. I don't know which one is real. All we know, Jesus is not in any of those places, right? So Jesus is somewhere else. The issue here, though, is so that material is in John, but not in the other Gospels. And what we also hear here, I'm trying to rush here. I know we only have 2 more minutes, is that we get the appearance to Mary. Mary goes to the tomb, and so and you can see that this is chapter 20, verses 11 and following. What you find here is there is no mention of a stone. There is no mention of a stone being rolled away, right? There's no mention of a stone at all, right? And so but we do know that there was customary for people to roll stones in front of tombs to keep the wild beasts from going in there ravaging the corpse, right? So, but there's no mention of a stone being rolled away. There's no mention of a stone at all. Here we get Mary going back and forth, right? She goes to tell the disciples, Peter and the disciple that Jesus loved, take off for the tomb, right? And they go on a mad dash. The beloved disciple gets there ahead of Peter, probably because he's younger and swifter of feet, right? But he doesn't go in. He waits for Peter to go in, and then Peter goes in, discovers the empty tomb. The beloved disciple goes in, sees it empty too, and then they both take off going back. And it's Mary who stays there. And then in verse 11, we get the conversation. Mary is weeping. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Right. This is where that comes. So Mary is weeping, and then she has a conversation. First, there are these 2 angels that appear to her, right? And then there's a conversation. Why are you weeping? They have taken my Lord, and we do not know. I do not know where they've taken him, right? And then Jesus calls her name, and there she realizes it's Jesus. And she says, Rabboni, or Rabbi, right? And then she realizes that's Jesus. It's in the calling of her name that she realizes who he is. And then, interesting, just give me a couple more minutes. Here that we say, that she says in verse 17, says, Jesus told her, do not hold on to me because I have not yet ascended to the Father. So we normally read that as Jesus says, don't touch me. But that's not what he said. It says, do not hold on to me. Apparently she was already holding on to him, right? You don't say, do not hold on to me unless somebody is holding on to you, right? So she's already holding on to him. He said, just do not hold on to him. So we don't know how long she was holding on. She don't know if it was a quick hug or a long hug. It probably was a long hug from somebody who you haven't expected to see. She probably was holding on and probably had held on. Jesus probably wasn't rebuking her. That's the kind of way we do not hold on to. Maybe it was like he held on to her too. And then he's like, okay, now let me go. You know what I mean? I think that way. That's my spiritual malady. But we see that she held him, right? So this is not, don't hold me, or she held him. And I like this part because Here is the sequence of Jesus' appearance, and we'll end with this. It's the sequences of Jesus' appearance is a growing embrace of Jesus, right? As in the flesh, right? So Jesus is someone who you can hold. This is not a ghost, right? He's being held. He shows the disciples who we meet in the room, right? He shows his hands to them. It's just that Thomas is not there, but he shows them, right? He breathes on them. That means he is inhaling and exhaling air. Ghosts don't have to do that, right? So here we have is somebody who is actually flesh and blood person. This resurrection is bodily resurrection. There is no hocus pocus here, right? And this is what I see John is repeatedly saying, that giving evidence that this is a tangible, the fleshy kind of resurrection. And then it all comes to a head with Thomas, right? Putting his hands actually inside the wounds, right? Wounds and inside the stabbing and stuff. And so this is the evidence of Jesus as not being a kind of a translucent figure, right? But actually a real full body resurrection, right? And that is on par with the earth. Actually, the chapter, scholars think that the book actually stops with chapter 20. After we get through the chapter 20, verse 30 and 31, where we get the purpose of the book, we think that really is the conclusion of the book. And chapter 21 was a later addition to the book. And so here then we get Jesus appearing to the 12 again. This deviates from the majority of the appearances of Jesus's appearance we find in Luke and some of the other Gospels, where Jesus is always making appearances around Jerusalem. Here we have an appearance of Jesus in the Galilean area. That's outside of Jerusalem. So they are outside of the Jerusalem, and Jesus makes an appearance. This is a deviation from the appearances around Jerusalem as a location. And here Jesus is appearing, and they are fishing, and Jesus appears. They don't identify him right away, and then I think it's the beloved disciple. The beloved disciple says, "It's Jesus," and then what? Peter recognizes Jesus, and he does what? He gets up out of the boat, and they says he puts on his clothes because he was naked. Why do they say that, right? Why they give us that detail, right? He was down in the boat naked, or loosely clad, or had hardly nothing on, right? And then Jesus is appearing. They say it's Jesus, and he gets up, puts his clothes on, and dives in the water. I love that. That Peter is up. That's how he took off to go to the tomb, remember? He's the first one to dash off. He is always headstrong, running after Jesus. He follows Jesus when Jesus is taken away, right? He is the one cloaking that. He follows Jesus after he denies it, but he follows, right? You see what I mean? He's the one who always pursuing Jesus. So he jumps in the water to get him. Oh, yeah. Take me with you, all of this other kind of stuff. And so Jesus goes. And then it's the commission with what to do. Do you love me? Do you love me 3 times? Feed my sheep, right? And so Jesus is telling him, giving him the commission to go forward. And then Jesus, at the end in chapter 20, verse 21, verse 19, he says, after this, he said to him, follow me. Follow me. And then verse 20, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, and he was the one who had reclined next to Jesus. And then they go on to identify him as the one with this gospel, writing the gospel. And yet Jesus, and there's the idea that Jesus said that he wouldn't see death, but he disputes that in verse 23, saying that Jesus didn't say that. He just said that if it is my will that he remains until I come, that is what is that to you? He didn't say that the disciple that Jesus loved wasn't going to die. And then he says, this is the testimony of the one. And so in verse 24, this is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. But that's a clue right there that this is an addition, right? This is an editorial work. Because why would you write like that if you were writing in the first person? You wouldn't. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. All right. Thank you for paying attention over the time and staying. Are there any questions on the? I don't see any here. Any in the room? Okay, let us receive the benediction. Oh God, we give you thanks for your son Jesus, who came down to tabernacle with us for a little while. He showed us many things that we were marveled at, and told us many things that we did not understand. And Lord, he told us who he was, but we didn't believe him, and we didn't know, and so we treated him bad, and we weren't our best selves at all. And he tried to love us, and we didn't know how to love him back. But yet he went all the way to the cross for us, and asked you to forgive us because of our ignorance of who he was and what he wanted to do, and the love that he was showing us from you. We were just ignorant. And Lord, now with the help of the Holy Spirit, we are coming to know you better. And we're coming to know who Jesus is and was for us. And we give you thanks for that. Thank you for the comforter, the advocate, the one who stands by us and stands with us. Thank you for the strength that allows us to go on from day to day. Lord, we say we believe, and we ask you to help our unbelief. Thank you for the gift of your word. It's true and testifies of you. Thank you for the witnesses of old, and thank you for the testimony of those who are right now living lives worthy to be called your children, that act as a ray of hope for us and a illumination of what can happen to those who actually surrender to you, and the way that their lives can be made marvelous because of you. And so thank you for the testimony of the ones who sing your songs, and the ones who pray and talk to you, the ones who have a special relationship with you and don't just hide it for themselves, but they tell us all about it, and they try to convince us that there is a reality in serving and knowing you. So we give you thanks for mothers and fathers and uncles and deacons and deaconess and all those who stand in the gap for us, and those who stand defending the church, yet lifting up the bloodstained banner, saying that there is a way, there is a better way. Thank you for the gift of those who still believe, but they have not seen, but yet they believe. And Lord, when it's all said and done, we hope our lives are pleasing to you, and that which we offer to you is acceptable. And whatever we lack, we just plead the blood of Jesus right now. Our little bit placed in the Master's hand becomes much. It allows us to call you our Father, and for you to say, well done. Come on up a little higher. Now to the one who is able to present us before the throne without fault or wrinkle, to the one true, all-wise God. And all of the people said, Amen.